Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, four nerds by nerds, hanging out with.
Anarchist Ted.
And in this GM91, we discuss story choke points.
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with us.
So we have another GM911 from Nathan, and his problem is flight plus invisibility, and fear of death is ruining his game. Now, with most of our GM91s, we put them down in the description below. If you have one, you can send it to nerdarchy@gmail.com. Also, if you just have a viewer suggestion. So what he's saying is, every time he puts in an encounter, an ambush,
Trap.
or a trap, his players just cast invisibility or fly and avoid it. I don't know how you just cast invisibility or fly and avoid traps and ambushes. Apparently, they're not very good.
All right, so that is actually the first two problems. Number one, if you have traps and ambushes, they're supposed to be a surprise. Like, they're not designed to just be like, oh, it's over there, let's just walk around it. That's unless you've got, Mr. Super Perception or Miss Super Perception, as the case may be, in your party, you're not going to find these things all the time, and sometimes you're not going to find it at all. There are creatures in the monster manual that no perception check is going to tell you that mud puddle is anything more than a mud puddle, or that tree is anything more than a tree. They could literally be monsters, and you have no clue about it until it decides to come out of hiding.
Yeah, so there's that. And now, like, from a recent example of my own game, I ran just a couple of nights ago. So I had basically planned like one combat encounter for the whole evening, possibly. And I was like, okay, well, you see travelers on the road in the distance, so I gave them a chance to do whatever they wanted to do. And one of them was a barbarian, and they had the eagle totem. And they're like, oh, well, what exactly do I see? Because then I'm like, oh, right, you can see like a mile away, can't you? So I fully describe and tell them what it is. And they had been traveling on this road that I just described as being really dirty and dusty, and like they kept getting the road dust was just creeping up their legs onto their bodies. So they're like, well, we want to try and avoid these gnolls. We don't want to fight them. We want to go around them. We want to do whatever. We want to hide. So I'm like, does anybody have nature or survival? And they're like, yes. And they're like, we also want to cast invisibility. So I'm like, so I do bring up, well, they have hyenas with them. They're probably going to be able to sniff you guys out. They're like, oh, well, we want to roll in the dirt. So I'm like, all right, you can roll in the dirt. So they roll in the dirt. They cast invisibility. And, even some people are like, oh, why didn't you make them rolls? Like, I didn't feel a need to do a roll off. I'm like, you know what? I just basically did a passive stealth check for the party versus a passive stealth check for the monsters. The monsters were going to have disadvantage. I'm like, they're just not going to defy them. They're going to hide. They're going to be able to get away and whatever. And the encounter just didn't happen. So, what happened for the rest of the session? They went to it, before that encounter and after that encounter, there was just a bunch of role-playing that happened. You don't really generally need to fly away from that or be invisible for it. So you can do other things in the game. You can do exploration. You can have role-playing encounters. If they don't want to fight, don't fight. Like, you don't have to fight all the time. You can. There's definitely other options in the game. And if your players, if they're so scared of their characters getting hurt or dying, I guess, I don't know, maybe you guys are going to run a drama.
And that's entirely a possibility. If the players actually enjoy role playing, then have the problems be dealt with in negotiations, in just talking. And that's what these guys become experts at doing. See if they've got ranks in persuasion, deception, intimidation, and hopefully they've got good charismas, and you have the ability to run this fantastic game. I've learned in recent years with 5th edition, you don't need to have combat every 3 seconds. You don't need to have combat even every session. So you can get into what it is that your table likes. Now, if the party wants to get into the mechanics of combat and whatever have you, but at the same time they're afraid their characters are going to die, well, then give them encounters that are designed to not only, offer a little bit of challenge, but on the offside, never end in death. if the players are, young, or they just haven't matured into that death is part of this game, then don't ever have them lose a character. I
I
know.
wouldn't do that. I wouldn't baby them. I would murder their characters anyway.
Well, that's your particular playing style, and that is.
Well, if there's no loss, then there's no gain either. That's all. That's why I just don't think that's a great solution.
I don't.
It's a solution, and clearly these guys have lost characters. They've had character deaths, so the thing to do is what are their objectives? What are their goals? What are their characters trying to accomplish? And all good stories have to have conflict, right? They don't have to have death, but they do have to have conflict.
Mhm.
But if you're saying combat is a part of it, then more than likely that is probably a real risk. Or if they're killing things, then there's also the possibility of being killed. So that is what I would say to that. But the other thing is, like, how are they even accomplishing any goals if they never have to deal with anything? Like, there's going to be times where magic isn't going to work. There's going to be times where things can see invisibility. There's going to be times where the monsters fly. Like, so you don't have to do those things all the time, but there's just going to be like these choke points in the adventure that their normal solutions just aren't going to work, and they're going to have to come up with new solutions.
I completely agree. I was just trying to put out multiple options for Nathan to deal with. And
Well, he already put like a plethora of magic items in there to like bring them back, share their health, things like that.
and I think part of that is actually feeding into the issues. This game, I believe, is for the most part less magic item heavy than previous iterations of D&D. You don't have all of these things that, I've got all these magic item slots that need to be filled. It's far more in the, okay, of the really useful magic items, you get 3. And that's usually where it stops. So, like, yeah, you might have a handful of, lesser things, but I don't know how they're doing invisibility and flight at the same time, because, it's not easy with the spells. Perhaps there's a lot of magic items that have been, handed out that seem to do this stuff. I don't know, but I think that should be trimmed. Find ways that the players, through their own powers and things, are able to deal with the problems and are forced into situations where they can't run, they can't fly. If they have to go into a dungeon, well, certain traps are going to fill an area. There's no flying around it.
Well, here's what I would say to that. It's not so much that you should need areas where they can't run away or can't fly away, but you have to have areas. When I say story choke points, and that's what I literally mean, story choke points, not physical choke points, not, you can't go further or you can't do this thing. No, you can't progress the story without getting through this point, right? And it might literally be like a puzzle or a challenge that they have to overcome that you can't get around it with, casting a spell or whatever. And like that challenge might be you have to defeat the Black Knight. Like you have to defeat him. Like that is the only way. The door behind him will not open, unless you defeat him.
Right.
So you can fly around all you want, you can run away all you want, but if you can't defeat him under the terms of this particular combat, then you can't progress the story. Now you can leave, but you don't get to progress the story. And that's what I think this DM really needs to do is I think he needs to analyze the stories that they're trying to tell as a group, and he has to create choke points in those stories that is going to engage them in some kind of conflict, whether it's through exploration, combat, or role play. But he's gonna have to force them kind of to do these things if they want the story to progress, or they're gonna have to move on in a different direction. But eventually, you're gonna always butt up against that wall of like, hey, do you want to keep going? Yes or no.
Right.
And there is going to be conflict. All good stories, no matter whether there is battles or not, all good stories have conflict in them.
And you have to have that to really have tension and to have a good enjoyable encounter or a good enjoyable session. So if the players are just running away, it does not seem that great a story. It does not seem that enjoyable. Now, if you look at, after reading many different novels written in a D&D-esque setting, and then actually sitting down and reading The Lord of the Rings, where for the beginning portion, it's like, oh, it's a monster. Run away, hide, flee. I'm like, dude, these guys suck. Now, when you watch the movies, that's not what you're seeing at all. Like they do run a little bit here and there, but it's still a situation where
Well, they run a lot in the movies, but they're running battles. There's conflict. They're fighting, or there's dramatic tension in the
right.
scenes.
So like that's what you want to be able to replicate. You want to look at those movies and see how those characters they care about their lives and they're willing to do combat in order to make it happen, but at the same time, it's not just okay. Well, there's a monster, I run in and I charge every single time.
Not a worry with these players. But yeah, think about the story. Think about creative solutions that they could come up with, or you could come up with, to make them engage with the story. Why is it other than just fear? So clearly, you haven't given them something greater to aspire to. That maybe is worth risking their lives for, and that's the thing. Like maybe they have to risk their lives to save the town, or they're not really that great of heroes, if they don't really care that much, they're more concerned about their own skin.
Right.
So go to the comments below. That's where you can find tons more solutions, I'm sure. What do you guys got for Nathan? Also, while you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out over on Facebook.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.